Horror stories. I will never forget the night when death roamed the streets unannounced. I was walking along a lonely sidewalk when, suddenly, I came across a body lying on the ground. The scene was so brutal that my blood ran cold. The corpse bore signs of extreme violence, with deep cuts and dark patches of blood splattered across the pavement. That was the first blow of a wave of terror that would forever alter my reality. In that moment, I sensed that something was terribly wrong in the city. It wasn't long before another body appeared in a nearby alley. This time, a man with his face grotesquely disfigured. Violence had become an everyday occurrence, and each new discovery only deepened the atmosphere of unbearable fear. I wandered aimlessly, my mind flooded with questions that vanished into the night's shadows. Trusting my instincts, I began to roam the streets in search of answers. The darkness seemed to conceal secrets that only revealed themselves to those willing to look. As I moved forward, I noticed peculiar details at every crime scene. The body's positions, the absence of any signs of robbery, and an eerie silence that screamed out in the dark. I started to suspect that this wasn't an isolated attack, but something cold, calculated, and planned. A series of acts pointing to a twisted message. The city, once a haven of tranquility, had transformed into a nightmare. Every step I took reminded me that I was caught in a vortex of terror. My fear peaked when, in a small park, I discovered a scene that surpassed any horror I could have imagined. There, among the rain-soaked grass, lay at least 5 bodies arranged in chaotic disarray. The mingling of blood and anguish created an image so shocking that for a moment I felt paralyzed, as if time had stopped in that instant of pure suffering. With my heart pounding, I retreated from the scene. Yet the terror clung to me as I tried to gather my thoughts in a modest cafe. I observed the few souls brave enough to venture outside. Their vacant stares and the silence of those sheltering in their fear told me that violence had spread like a plague. The streets emptied, and the feeling of insecurity grew with every passing minute. Hours later, I received an anonymous text message. Its content was brief and direct. No one is safe. The city is already part of the cycle. The starkness of those words filled me with an indescribable dread. I felt as if we were being watched, that each crime was a piece of a macabre, premeditated plan. With every word, the terror seized my mind, making me question every shadow, every sound. I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. While crossing a dark bridge over a river, I caught sight of a man's silhouette emerging from the gloom. The figure was blurred, yet the intent in his movements was unmistakable. He was watching, stalking, calculating. I barely had time to react before witnessing another act of inhuman violence. In an instant, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night as I saw a man being brutally impaled. The horror struck me so hard that my heart seemed ready to burst out of my chest. In that very moment, I realized I was entangled in a web of death from which there was no escape. Every corner of the city had turned into a stage for terror. With my mind awash in doubts and my soul trapped in a labyrinth of violence, I began searching for clues to explain the magnitude of what was happening. I walked for hours, questioning anyone daring enough to speak, trying to piece together a pattern amid the chaos. Answers were scarce and laced with despair. No one knew who was behind the brutality or what they aimed to achieve. The early hours of the morning became a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The air was heavy with a menacing silence, and every shadow seemed to hide a lethal secret. Then, as I wandered through a desolate neighborhood, I stumbled upon something that would change everything. A small notebook, abandoned among a thicket, its yellowed pages stained with blood. As I flipped through it, I discovered that its lines recounted acts of violence with a chilling precision, as if someone had wanted to leave a meticulous record of each crime. The dates and locations were described in words rather than numbers, but the message was clear. Everything had been planned. As I read, a shiver ran down my spine when I saw that the notebook detailed events that had yet to occur. The cold detachment with which the events were narrated made me fear for my own life. I began to feel that every step I took was being watched by an unseen gaze. That the mastermind behind these crimes knew I was seeking the truth and was using it to draw me closer to my fate. The idea slowly sank in. This was not random violence, but a premeditated cycle of which I was a part. A trap laid to ensnare anyone who dared to investigate. With the notebook in hand, I decided to return to the place where it all began. The street where I'd found the first body. There, under the flickering light of a lamppost, I searched for any sign that might unravel the mystery. But what happened next surpassed any nightmare I had ever imagined. From the darkness emerged a figure, silent and resolute, who advanced toward me without uttering a word. Before I could react, I felt a heavy blow, followed by a shot that seemed to cut the very breath from the world around me. Pain spread through my body, my vision blurred. The last thought I could cling to was that the violence was unstoppable. As I fell to the ground in the cold night, the image of that figure faded into the darkness, leaving me with a profound sense of emptiness and doom. In those final moments, I understood that the cycle of death was closing in around me. The city, once my sanctuary, had become an abyss of terror from which there was no escape. Now, In these last flickers of consciousness, everything has been reduced to a whisper in the dark. Human brutality is real and, at times, unyielding. The words from that notebook continue to echo in my mind like an inescapable verdict. There was no great supernatural mystery, only the dark reflection of despair and violence that resides deep within us all. That night, the cycle was sealed. The figure who attacked me was merely the final link in a chain of hate and resentment that had begun long ago, leaving no room for redemption. With each death, the city sank further into a spiral of terror that no innocent soul could halt. The truth is painful and raw. In this world, violence is not an isolated act, but an open wound in the heart of society. And now, as my mind slowly fades into darkness, I can only accept that somewhere the cycle will continue. The true horror is not just the brutal act itself, but the abyss into which we can all, at some point, fall. Inescapable and relentless, the cycle of death closes forever.